All right, as we started out in chapter 8 this past week, we studied about 5 different miracles that Jesus had performed. And then after that, we find that he got on the boat, he went back over to Capernaum, and when he got back over there, then we're in chapter 9, and then there's 6 more things that he's going to be studying. Now, we've already studied down there the one there, the man healed of the palsy and so forth this last week. And now then we're down to chapter 9 and in verse 14. Now, as we look at these events, we're in a section now of where he is just doing one miracle after another. And he gives us somewhat of details about several of these miracles. And then he kind of lumps them down there in number 6, if you'll look at the last one there. Number 6, he went about doing good and healing all manner. In other words, he just lumped hundreds of miracles, I guess, all in one statement. Now, let's keep in mind, as we study the Gospels, the purpose the Gospels were written for. Unless we constantly keep that in mind, we will miss the point. He didn't write the Gospels in order to teach you and me how to become a Christian, did he? God gave us the book of Acts for that. He didn't write the Gospels to tell us how Moses led the children of Israel through the wilderness. See? He gave us other books for that. He gave us Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John to teach us that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. Now, to whom were these books written? Were they written to Christians? No. They were written to every conceivable individual that you can possibly think of. Matthew was written to the Jews. Mark was written to the Gentiles. Luke was more of a worldwide situation. John seems to be written to the whole world. And so what he's doing is writing these things and giving us these things so that anybody in the world can take a look at the story of Jesus Christ, and we will come up with one conclusion. What is that one conclusion? Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God. So that is the purpose of all of this, is to show us that Jesus was deity. Now, as we start tonight, we're picking up our story now in chapter 9. And so as we go to chapter 9, I don't want that one yet. As we go to chapter 9 and down in verse 14 then is where we pick it up. He says, Then came to him the disciples of John, saying, Why do we and the Pharisees fast oft, but thy disciples fast not? Now, the Pharisees had a custom of fasting 2 times a week. How many times did the Bible, the law of Moses, how many times did it command you to fast? Anybody know? 1 time per year. That's right, 1 time per year on a certain feast day. But these people fasted twice in the week. And so John's disciples are also fasting. Now, there were 2 purposes for fasting. Number 1 was to be obedient to God down on that feast day that he commanded the fast, which would fall in about our October. And the other is that missing the meals when there was a sadness, a tragedy of some kind in your life. When there was something that was not going right. The death in a family would cause fasting. Loss of anything would cause fasting. And people would fast on these very solemn, serious occasions. Now, John's disciples were fasting. And they came to him, and they noticed that the disciples of Jesus were not fasting. They seemed to be a bunch of happy guys going along. So they said, now, why is it that we fast oft, but your disciples do not fast? And Jesus said unto them, Can the sons of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? But the days will come when the bridegroom shall be taken away from them, and then will they fast. Now that's his answer. His answer, he doesn't say, look, the reason my disciples don't fast is because they don't have any sorrow. The reason my disciples don't fast is because they are happy under the present conditions. One of these days, I'm going to be taken from them. Sadness will come in their life, and then they're going to fast when that happens. He didn't explain it that way. He explained it by giving them a parable, by giving them an illustration. So he asked them a question. It's called a rhetorical question. It's not one that he expects an answer to, but it's one that everybody would understand. So his answer is, can the sons of the bridegroom mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them? So he said, let's take a wedding. Now, here in a wedding, you have a bridegroom, and you have the friend of the bridegroom, and he is the one that makes all the preparations, gets everything ready for the marriage feast. And when the marriage feast comes, what kind of an occasion is it? It's a happy, contented occasion, isn't it? Right? And so he says, under that condition, do people fast? In other words, is that why we have a wedding feast, or is it not for the enjoyment and the happiness and the contentment and the party atmosphere? So he said, when the bridegroom is still there, when the party is still going on, there's no fasting. But once the bridegroom leaves, then there's fasting. There's fasting then. I suppose all of us have been to a party, and we've made a lot of preparation to have the party, and you're looking forward to it, and so we have the party, and there's happiness, and there's contentment, and there's singing, and joke-telling, and teasing, and it's just a happy, good time. And then everybody leaves. And what happens in your house when everybody leaves, and you look around? Wow, this thing is a cluttered mess. There's nobody here drinking Cokes, nobody here eating. Here it is. We're alone. It's kind of a period of sadness, isn't it? Huh? Let's jump in, get chairs up, get dishes put away. And so the attitude changes immediately. So what Jesus is telling them is, fasting has a purpose. Fasting has a purpose, and it's not to be done during the happy, contented times of your life. So he says, here, he's going to tell them now that there are just some things in life that you don't do. Now, one of the things you don't do is you don't cry when you're having fun at a party. You don't fast and cry and go on a hunger strike when there is a marriage feast going on. It's not appropriate to do it at that time. Now, here's how he puts it. He's going to show us there are just some things that's not appropriate. He said, and no man putteth a piece of undressed cloth in an old garment, for that which should fill it up taketh away from the garment, and a worse rent is made. Now, this is back before they had the shrink-proof clothing. And so if you had a garment, it was torn, and it had been washed 100 times, and you go get a new piece of cloth and sew into it, what happens the next time it is washed? The new piece shrinks, the old doesn't, and it tears it, and it makes it worse. So he said, they're just things that you learn not to do in this life. That's one of them. Now, another thing, neither do men put new wine in old wineskins. Now, a wineskin is not what we would think of today as a bottle. Their wineskins was this. They go out and take a kid, a goat, a baby goat, and they would skin the goat. Now, they would not cut the stomach down, but they would skin it like they do a rabbit. In other words, they'd cut the hind legs up here, and then they'd pull the skin down so that the skin of the goat is a whole skin. Then they would turn it inside out. Then they would tie the legs together. And now then, you have a bottle. You have it depends on how big the goat is. You have a container, and you can put new wine in that container. Now, when you put new wine in, of course, wine starts fermenting, doesn't it? And expanding. What will happen to this nice, new, fresh, pliable goat skin? It will expand with it. But suppose you take an old goat skin, one that's been around for a few years, it's already expanded, it's brittle, and you put new wine in it, and it begins to expand, what will happen to your goat skin? Right? Then it's going to break. So what he says is, there are just some things you learn in this life to do and not to do. And this is his answer to why my disciples don't fast. Now he's telling them, one of these days, I will be taken from them, and then they will fast. Now, if you and I will run our brain ahead as we studied the book of Acts, and when all of a sudden Jesus was taken up into the heavens, Did the disciples say, "Oh boy, this is the good days now"? Is that what they did? No. They went back and they sat there and they waited around. And so they were wondering, he's dead. He's gone. We just well go back to fishing here. It was a sad period of time in their life. Well, that's what Jesus is telling them. The day will come when I'm taken away, and then they will fast. Okay? End of story. That's it. Now we go to the next. But as you look at this, one thing that you can look at and see about Jesus. Now, what we've seen, you can see when he, previous to this, when he stilled the sea, that showed his power, didn't it? See? That showed his miraculous power. What would this show you? What would you get out of this? His intelligence. When they come up and they hit him with this, and he was able to answer them in this impeccable way, in this unusual way, in this way of where anybody could understand it, instead of answering it in a way of where only a philosopher would have to try to interpret it. Why, here it is. His words were ready at his tongue. His answers were clear. His answers were concise. Now, I'll make this point from time to time, because we'll go along and we'll find him doing this on different occasions, under different circumstances. Sometimes in a very nice way, sometimes in a very harsh way, but always in a perfect way. So I want us now to be prepared as we go through his life, not only to look at the miracles, not only to see all of these fabulous things he did by reversing the laws of nature and taking control of nature, but how he also was able to deal with mankind and able to have a ready answer under any and every circumstance by anybody who came to him and asked him. It might be his disciples who were his friends. It might be his arch enemies. But every time, those words flowed off of his tongue in a magnificent way. And this right here is one of the first examples that we find of that as we're studying the book of Matthew now. Okay, now we turn to something else in verse 18. While he spake these things unto them, behold, there came a ruler and worshipped him, saying, My daughter is even now dead, but come and lay thy hand on her, and she shall live. Now, when he said she's even now dead, what he means is she is right on the crossing line of dead. As far as I'm concerned, she's dead. Now, she wasn't quite dead yet. Now, the reason I know she wasn't quite dead is because as you read Mark and Luke, and he is going off, his servants come and meet him, and they say, don't bother the master because she just died. See? And so this man, the ruler, was correct. In other words, come and heal her. If you can get there, come and heal her. She's dead for all practical purposes. But if you'll come and lay your hands on her, she'll live. And Jesus arose and followed him, and so did his disciples. Now, while he's going to this ruler's house to raise this girl who is dead, an interesting thing happens on the way. And behold, a woman who had an issue of blood 12 years came behind him and touched the border of his garment. For she said within herself, If I do but touch the garment, I shall be made whole. But Jesus, turning and seeing her, said, Daughter, be of good cheer. Thy faith hath made thee whole. And the woman was made whole from that hour. Now, by putting Mark and Luke in here, we have a couple extra little interesting things in here. That Jesus was going along. She comes up and said, if I can just touch his clothes. She touched his clothes, and she was healed immediately. And it said, Jesus felt the power go out of him. And he turned around in this crowd, whole crowd of people, who touched me? Who did that? Now, if you would have done that, would you have volunteered? Who touched me? And the disciples said, Master, there's so many people around. Everybody's rubbing up against you and hitting you, and who knows? No, somebody touched me. Who touched me? And then she confessed. She came and said, this is what I thought. And then he says, daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. Now, this would be an example of where really the miracle was done by God rather than Jesus doing it himself. Now, it was done through him, and that is, she came up and she touched that, and then he felt the power go out, and he turned around. Who did it? She told him. And then he said, your faith is what's made you whole. I think it's a rather interesting thing that you say, well, if he didn't know she was touching him, and he didn't turn around and say, you know, you're healed and so forth, how would it happen? Well, obviously God is also working in this, isn't he? See? And so here's a girl, a woman, her faith is so strong. She said, that man has such power, if I could just touch his clothes. If I could just touch his clothes. No? Now, let me ask you this. Was that true or false? If you touched Jesus' clothes, would you have been healed? There anything that would show that? No. A lot of people touched him. What's this? That's right. It's only if the divinity wants you to be healed. It's not just there's something magic and we come up and we touch his clothes, you see, and we'll be healed. Now, she really wasn't healed because she touched his clothes. Why was she healed? Because of her faith. He said, because of your faith, you are healed. Now, her faith, she believed in him so strongly that she said, if I can just get up there and touch that, I know he's capable of healing me. She had such great faith that when she touched the clothes, well, it wasn't the touching the clothes. That's the point that I want to get at. See, it wasn't the touching the clothes. And yet it was the touching of the clothes. What do you mean? It was. Right?
Because
in her mind, her faith. If I can just get up there and touch his clothes. And as soon as she did it, bang, she was healed. And so she goes on her way then. In verse 23, and when Jesus came into the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a tumult, stop. Well, let's read another. He said, give place, for the damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. Now, let's put a funeral in its context. Because, remember, was this written to us Americans who have funeral homes? Somebody dies, you wait 3 days, then you have a funeral, you see? No, this was written to those people over there. Now, how did they go about this? All right, the way that they would go about it is that somebody died, they were generally buried the same day. They'd try to bury him that evening before the sun went down. That was a normal situation they would have. And they didn't put out notices to all the friends. Everybody come to the funeral, you know, next Thursday or something of this nature. But, of course, all the family and all the close friends would be there. And this is the way all of the funerals would take place there. It still takes place, really, that way today. Now, another thing that they would do is that they would sit around and they would lament, and that means cry, moan, ache, pain, make all the noises you make when you're in such great misery and great pain. And a lot of times they would hire professional mourners. Now, they would be people that was their profession. That you go get them, you hire them, come, my daughter's died, I want you to come and mourn today. So these women then would come and they would sit there. They didn't even know the dead person, but they would sit there and they would mourn. They would, oh, and they would make all of these noises in this way. So they were trying to show respect to the dead about how sorrowful that the living was that they had died. Now, this was a custom of the day. It was a custom of the day. I was reading a book not too long ago written by J.W. McGarvey, and he's one of the first guys who took a trip over to Israel in the last century, and it was about 1863, I think, that he went. And so he said as he was coming up the walls of Jerusalem, why, down there a little bit, why, he heard the funniest sound that you ever heard. And he's wondering what in the world is going on down here. So he walked down there just a little ways, and he saw, and there sat some people there on the hillside, and they had the professional mourners, and they were having a funeral, and the funeral was going on and in the same way that was there. And so their funerals were not like our funerals. That's what I want us to see. And so here were the mourners in there. Here this person is dead. Everybody knows she's dead. They knew death as well or better than we do. In fact, a whole lot better, because today you're not dead until a doctor pronounces you dead, are you? In other words, you can know somebody's dead, but you can't say they're dead until you call a doctor, and then he looks at them and says, yeah, they're dead, and then that makes them legally dead in our sanitized society here. But in those days, why, death was a family thing. It was a personal thing. So they come in this house, and so here are the family, and here are your lamenters, and they're all there, and they're making this noise. Then Jesus comes in, and he says, give place. In other words, step aside. Step out. And he asked them to leave the room there. And he said, for the damsel's not dead, but sleepeth. And they laughed him to scorn. So who is this guy? What in the world is he? Who is this guy walking in here in the middle of our funeral and telling us that this person is not dead, and for us to remove ourselves and get out of here? So they laughed him to scorn. They really made fun of him. But when the crowd was put forth, he entered in and took her by the hand, and the damsel rose. Matthew and Luke says he looked down and he says, damsel, arise. And he lifted her up and she arose. Then he turned to the parents and said, give her something to eat. This was a normal thing. She had been through an illness and she died and she needed nourishment, and so give her something to eat there. And then he told him, he says, and don't go telling this to other people. Okay? Don't go spreading this around. Now, there are several times when Jesus would say, don't go tell people. There were other times when he would say, go tell people. Now, there's always the question, why did he say that? And I have the answer to every one of them. So just ask me every time they come up, and I'll give you the answer. And the answer is definite, is I don't know. I don't know. Why did he do that this time? Why did he do it that time? I don't know. There was a reason. There was a reason. You might have a reason telling somebody, here, I want to tell you something, and hey, would you go tell other people, spread it around? See? Spread it around. I got an email today, and down at the end of it, it says, spread this as far as you can in there. It was something about the war in Iraq, you see, and tell everybody you know. And, of course, then you get another letter. It might say, don't tell anybody about this. And there could be 100 different reasons. Some of the reasons would be that, as you begin to see, that Jesus didn't want the crowds pushing him at that time. He would have been just inundated with crowds and all day long and performing miracles and teaching them, and the evening coming and the crowds around him, and he's trying to get away. Did he ever sneak off and go up in the mountains and spend all night up there, you see, in prayer? See, he would do that in trying to get away. It may be, now these are just guesses, it may be that he didn't want other people to run and come up to him and say, hey, would you come over and raise my dead? You know, my daughter or my wife died last year. Would you raise them? And so he didn't want to have to deal with that. I don't have any idea, you see, is the whole point. But he did tell him, don't go spread it abroad. But now, it says, and the fame hereof went forth into all the land. So did it get out? Yeah. A lot of times it'll say he told them, don't tell anybody, and they say they went and told everybody. See? But at any rate, you don't hold this kind of thing down. Now, when he said don't go tell it, it might have suppressed it, but you don't hold it down. The best thing that I could think of, really, to put it in the way it would happen would be, suppose we were having a funeral, and I'm going to preach the funeral, And so all of you are sitting in a funeral home up here waiting. And I walk in the funeral home. What would you expect me to do? Show some reverence and get up and preach and so forth. And suppose I walk in and I say, what are you guys doing here? Everybody get out. And what? This person's not dead, just sleep. Everybody get out. And I'll run you out of the funeral home. I'll stop and think, what would you do? Just
I should go check and see if the person was dead.
well, I'm running you out. What would go on? Same thing. Human nature never changes. I run you out of that funeral home. Would you all just go in, get in your car, and drive home? You know what would happen. You'd be standing outside there, and you'd be murmuring, who in the world does Lowell think he is? What does he mean by this? I've never seen anything like this happen. I've never seen anybody come in and tell somebody, which we know is dead, that person is just asleep, and then run the people out. Have you ever seen anybody break up a funeral? Have you ever seen anybody show such disrespect at a funeral? Who does he think he is? What do you think is going on? What? And in other words, it'd be something you've never seen before, wouldn't it? And you'd be standing out there and you're talking about all that. What would you do when the dead person and I walk out and say, okay, we'll see you, and I take off down the street? Would that impress you? Man, what would you do that night? You'd wonder, and then what else would you do? You're going to tell everybody. That's what you're going to do. You're going to say, you can't believe what I saw today. See? You can't believe this. And you're going to tell some people. And it's going to be the talk. Now, see, the reason I'm saying this is these things actually literally happened. See? Actually literally happened. That's the reason I wanted to show that movie. And it did work right this last time, didn't it? Okay, I wanted to show that. It puts some perspective in there that when you're just reading your Bible a lot of times, you kind of get the idea, you know, that this happens separate and apart from society and everything out there, and we look at it through our eyes, and we don't realize it's right in the middle of a culture of people, right in the middle of a whole bunch of people. See? And these people will react the same as we react. And so you can just imagine what would happen in there. Now, here it is. It goes away. Now, these people have seen him raise the dead, not raise the dead. They've seen him kill calm the storm. They've seen him cure all manner of sickness. And now then, they've seen him raise the dead. What do you suppose is starting to happen in their mind? See? What's the purpose? What's the purpose of his life? Why is he spending 3 years doing this? See? To prove he is Jesus the Christ, the Son of God. What's his message? What's the primary message that he has? Repent ye, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand. I'm the Messiah. I'm the King. Get ready. I'm here. See? And so this 3-year period of time in his life is a very spatial period of time showing the people who he really is. Okay, verse 27. And as Jesus passed by from thence, he left there, 2 blind men followed him, crying out and saying, Have mercy on us, thou son of David. Now, what does that mean when they call him, thou son of David? How many times have you been called the son of David? Never has happened, has it? See? What does that mean when they called him? Thou son of David? That's another way of saying you are the Messiah. See? The Messiah was going to come and sit on whose throne? David's throne. Coming through the lineage of David. And so you'll see this, and this statement will come up again at different times. Jesus will ask them a question some of these days about the David and the Christ, one that they can't answer. But that terminology, that meant something to that generation of people. And so when these people said, Thou son of David, they're saying, You're the Messiah. See? You're the King. We now are believing in you. And when he was coming to the house, the blind men came to him, and Jesus said unto them, Do you believe that I am able to do this? And they said unto him, Yes, Lord. Then he touched their eyes, saying, According to your faith, be it done unto you. That's kind of interesting. Here's another thing. This is just a little different twist. Jesus has healed because of people's faith. But here he says, according to your faith. What does that mean? You're going to be healed according to your faith. Suppose they just had a little faith. Suppose that they thought, I bet you he is so powerful, I'll bet you he could probably make me see a little bit. Then that's the way you're going to see. If you think he is so powerful he can give me 20/20 sight, that's what's going to happen. I'll heal you according to your faith. So it's going to be up to you now. See? And it says, and their eyes were opened. And Jesus strictly charged them, saying, see that no man knoweth. So it showed they did have faith in him. They called him the Son of David. And now then he says, don't go tell anybody. But they went forth and spread abroad his fame in all the land. Now you and I wouldn't have done that. I know that. So put yourself in those blind men's shoes. How would you feel if you were a blind man groping through life and nobody there to help you? You're just trying to get along the best you can. How do you make your living if you're a blind man? You beg. See, this is it. And then all of a sudden you hear that this man is there, and you follow him and you chase him down. Would that be an easy thing to do for two blind men to catch up with him? And so you finally catch up with him, and then he turns around and he heals you, and now you can see. You and I would have said, Phew, boy, that's nice, isn't it? Let's go to town. What would you do? You would have jumped and screamed and yelled with happiness. You can't believe what happened to me. Would you go tell your family? Would you go tell your friends? See? Oh, man. See? Yeah. So Jesus is, these things are spread throughout society. I want us to see that as we go through here. They're spread throughout society. And as they went forth, behold, there was brought to him a dumb man. Now, you probably think I'm dumb, but I'm not. What does dumb mean? Mute. You can't speak. That's what it means. So they brought to him a mute man, a man who couldn't speak, possessed with a demon. And when the demon was cast out, the dumb man spake. And the multitudes marveled, saying, it was never so seen in Israel. We've never seen anything like this. Of all the marvelous things we've seen in our life, we've never seen anything like this. The dead are raised. The blind can see. The mutes can speak. We've never seen anything like this. But the Pharisees said, by the prince of demons casteth he out demons. Now over here are our philosophers. Here are our Pharisees. We're not impressed. We're not impressed. Because what do we know, us Pharisees, us religious leaders, us know-it-alls, I guess you'd put it. We're looking at him, and he hadn't come to ask us our advice, has he? In fact, you ever notice everything he says to us is kind of against us, see? And he's arguing with us. And so they're watching this thing. And even when they see these miracles, they will not admit he's the Christ. But I do want you to notice something they did admit. There is a confession there. And there's a big confession. What do they confess? Read it again. What? That he did it. He did a miracle. I will admit he did a miracle. But I have the answers to how he did it. You see, he's of the devil himself. And he did this by the prince of the demons, by the devil. See? Yeah, so he did a miracle, but he did it by by the power of the devil, not the power of God. Now this will come up again. Right now we'll just leave it. But this has come up, and then a little bit later, these guys are going to follow him around, and they'll bring this subject up again. And then Jesus will answer in a little while then. All right, verse 35. And Jesus went about all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues, and preaching the gospel of the kingdom, and healing all manner of sickness, disease, and all manner of sickness. Wow. How many miracles did that take in, that one verse? He went through all the cities. He healed every kind of disease that could be healed. See? He did all of these things. And when he saw the multitudes, he was moved with compassion for them, because they were distressed and scattered as sheep not having a shepherd. Then saith he unto his disciples, The harvest indeed is plenteous, but the laborers are few. Pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest, that he send forth his laborers into his harvest. So now, Jesus looks out and he sees the masses of people. The masses of the Jews. What would he be looking at? What would he be looking at? Think about it. What is the crowd like? These are the crowds that have been observing all these miracles. They are confounded. They are amazed. They are shocked. They've never seen it like this before. Here's a man that's doing all of these things. What's going through their mind? And he's saying, Repent ye, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And there they are. What we would say, people who don't know which way to go. People whose attention has been gotten. People that cannot answer the question of what is going on. People who have seen the miracles. How can this be? And here are the masses. Their mind is amazed. And with this, Jesus looks out and he uses this analogy. He looked at them and he looked at them with compassion. The poor people. These poor, ignorant souls out here, they are like a sheep without a shepherd. There's nobody to guide them. They need somebody to guide them. They need somebody to teach them and show them what to do. They're perplexed. They're amazed. They're like sheep without a shepherd. And then he looks at his disciples and he changes the figure now. He changes the figure. Instead of sheep, he changes it to harvest. The harvest indeed is plenteous. In other words, there's a good harvest. As you're thinking about a field of wheat that's all ripe, well, he's looking out at these people, and they're all ripe. They're ready to be harvested, but the laborers are few. How many laborers did they have at that time to send into the harvest to harvest those thousands of people? He had his 12 disciples. And so he said, they're out there, they're confused. They need somebody to guide them in all of this. So then in chapter 10, and he called unto him his 12 disciples and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal all manner of disease and all manner of sickness. Now, here he's getting ready to send them on what is called the limited commission. Now, that's not a Bible word. That's not what you find in the Bible. We've given that name because this is a limited commission. Jesus is going to tell these men, don't you go to the Gentiles, you only go to the Israelites. So I'm limiting you. Now later on, right before Jesus ascends into heaven, what did he tell them? Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. See, that's the unlimited. That's what people refer to as the Great Commission. So now here, though, he's getting ready to send his 12 into the Jewish community, into this community of people who have observed, they've seen this phenomena. Here's this individual who's come, who is a Jew, who is one of them, but doing all of these miracles. Is this him? Is it not him? The scribes say, the Pharisees say no. What is going on? So now he said, I'm going to give you now the power to perform miracles, and I'm going to send you out. Now he says, that gives us the name of the 12. Now the names of the 12 disciples were these. The first Simon, down through verse 4. Now I'm going to put up this chart up here as we look at it. In Matthew 10, in Mark 3, and Luke 6, we have the list of the disciples given to us. There are 12 of them that are there. Now as you start out, you find the first one there, he says, is named Simon. Then he mentions Andrew. Andrew's his name. And I'm putting it up here to show you they're out of order. See, a little bit out of order that's in here. But there it is in that way. Then James, the son of Zebedee, is there. So we've got them. Then John, his brother. So we've got him. Then we've got Philip and Bartholomew. They go right straight across. And then we've got Thomas, and he's set aside there by a couple of them. We got Matthew the publican, and he's there. You know, it's kind of interesting. The book of Matthew was written somewhere down in the 60s. Probably that's the general consensus where it was written. But let's say it was written in 60. That'd be 30 years after Christ, wouldn't it? And so 30 years after Christ, after he calls him, who is writing the book of Matthew? Matthew. Isn't it kind of interesting that 30 years later, Matthew says, and Matthew the publican? I think maybe if I were involved in a scandalous situation like that, I would have probably left that word out that is there. But he puts it in. He lets them know, yeah, this is the Matthew, who was that publican that we've already studied about. And then there's that James, the son of Alphaeus. And then there's Simon. And when you get to that word, that Canaanian there, that word doesn't mean a man from Canaan, but it means a man who is a kind of like a militiaman that we would talk about today, a vigilante of a kind. Now over here, Luke calls him Simon called the Zealot. And so the Zealots or the Zealots, they were called that because they were very zealous for the law. And you say, well, what did they do that the other people didn't? They'd fight for it. They'd get out and they'd fight for it. They were ready to kill. They were what we would call, especially in the 100 years ago, the vigilantes that would go out. We're going to clean up this mess. Well, Simon was one of those guys. So Jesus has called some fishermen. He's called a tax collector. He's called a vigilante, you see, in all of this. And, of course, then we know there's Judas the Iscariot in there. Now then you have Thaddeus, and Judas the son of James. And Judas is another name that Thaddeus would have. In other words, it'd be Thaddeus Judas or Judas Thaddeus, you see, that would be there. So you have your 12 disciples then that are given. Now, he's getting ready to send them out. I want you to notice now what he says. These 12 Jesus sent forth and charged them, saying, Go not into any way of the Gentiles, and enter not into any city of the Samaritans, but go rather to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. What has he just called them up here in verse 36 of the last chapter? He looked out there and he saw them, and he looked at them as sheep without a shepherd. I want you to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I want you to go to these people that are confused, that are wondering what is going on. They're hearing the Messiah has come. When they come out and see him, they're just seeing a man. And then they see miracles. But then their religious teachers tell them that yeah, but he's doing it through the devil. And these people are all confused. They need answers. So I want you to go out, and I want you to go to these people, and as you go preach, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. That's your message. Go out and tell them, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Who is this fellow that's going around performing these miracles? He's the king, see? So get ready. This is going to be our king. This is the Messiah. So go out now and get ready to preach this. There's where we're